Hamilton's steering wheel snapped mid-corner at Hugenholtz, and the SF25 speared into the Zandvoort gravel. The grandstands froze, but inside the Ferrari garage, the silence spoke volumes. This wasn't just a crash. With Ferrari clinging to second in the Constructors' standings by just 12 points over Mercedes, and Charles Leclerc accounting for nearly 70% of their tally, Hamilton's accident wasn't just carbon fibre scattered on Dutch tarmac. It was a flashing warning light on Ferrari's boldest gamble in a generation. What the onboard data revealed in those 3 seconds of oversteer told a deeper story about Hamilton's ongoing battle with Ferrari's ground effect philosophy. And what it exposed wasn't just technical, it was psychological, strategic, and potentially championship-defining. Because if this partnership doesn't click soon, Ferrari's dream of rebuilding with Hamilton could collapse before it even begins. On paper, Hamilton's Zandvoort weekend reads like a familiar 2025 pattern. Promise in qualifying, collapse in the race. He had been to just 0.052 seconds slower than Leclerc on Saturday. A clear sign of progress compared to earlier weekends where the gap exceeded 0.3. For 22 laps on Sunday, Hamilton was in lockstep with Leclerc and Mercedes' George Russell, circulating within a 3-second window. The SF25 looked balanced, the race pace finally encouraging. And then came Hugenholtz. The telemetry shows Hamilton carried 6 km/h more entry speed than Leclerc through the banked corner. It was aggressive, but in a Ferrari still prone to rear instability under combined load, that extra commitment tipped the balance. The rear axle broke loose, the car snapped, and Hamilton's race ended in the barriers. Isolated, it looks like a driver error, but in the broader narrative, it is something more complex. A driver still recalibrating instincts honed across 17 years in Mercedes machinery. The SF25's suspension design, reshaped this season, generates aero load differently through yaw and pitch. Where Hamilton once trusted the car to settle itself, Ferrari's package punishes over-rotation. And here lies the paradox. Leclerc, steeped in Ferrari's development DNA, drives around these quirks intuitively. Hamilton, by contrast, is still fighting his instincts. At Zandvoort, those instincts betrayed him. But the implications stretch far beyond a single crash. Ferrari's 260-point tally in the Constructors' Championship is already under siege. With McLaren soaring at 584 points, Ferrari's realistic fight is survival for second. And Hamilton's 0 at Zandvoort cut directly into that margin, leaving Mercedes only 12 points adrift. The numbers make it plain. Hamilton's mistakes are no longer personal setbacks. They're shifting the balance of Ferrari's season. And if he can't reconcile instinct with Ferrari's car philosophy soon, the team risks being dragged into a midfield battle it cannot afford. The real question is whether this is still a matter of adaptation or the first signs of decline. When Hamilton emerged from the gravel at Zandvoort, helmet under his arm, the body language told its own story. Shoulders slumped, steps slow. He didn't look like the 7-time world champion who once radiated inevitability. He looked like a man carrying the weight of expectation. Ferrari is a team unlike any other. The Tifosi adore you when you win, but they dissect every misstep. And in Italy, the press amplifies both extremes. The headlines after Hungary, where Hamilton finished a subdued 12th while Leclerc managed 4th, were brutal. Now, with Mercedes just 12 points behind Ferrari in the Constructors' race, the questions sharpen. Hamilton himself admitted before Zandvoort that the season has been not particularly enjoyable. He talked about losing sight of the fun, about noise clouding his dream of driving for Ferrari. Those aren't the words of a driver in control, they're the words of a driver searching for identity. It's not just performance, it's psychology. At Mercedes, Hamilton's bond with engineer Peter Bonington gave him confidence in moments of crisis. At Ferrari, with Riccardo Adami, the connection isn't there yet. Team radio has revealed tension rather than reassurance, and in Formula One, confidence is measured in tenths of a second. Even Fred Vasseur, usually Hamilton's staunch defender, recently admitted that Lewis can be too extreme in his reactions. When things go wrong, he magnifies the negativity. When things go right, the optimism borders on euphoric. Ferrari, already prone to overreaction, doesn't need another amplifier of drama inside the cockpit. But here's the paradox. Hamilton's honesty, his willingness to admit struggles, also shields him. By taking responsibility, he prevents the Tifosi from turning on him. At Monza this weekend, he'll still hear cheers, yet goodwill has limits. Ferrari didn't sign him just for humility. They signed him for victories. The psychological battle is becoming inseparable from the technical one, and if Ferrari can't stabilize Hamilton's mindset, the cracks may spread into the team's foundation. The question now is whether Ferrari will continue shielding him, or if internal pressure will start to shift toward accountability. Ferrari doesn't deal in patience. This is the team where even legends like Alain Prost, Fernando Alonso, and Sebastian Vettel felt the weight of politics as much as the stopwatch. And in 2025, Fred Vasseur finds himself walking the same tightrope. It's easy to forget how precarious his own position looked just months ago. Rumours swirled that Ferrari executives had sounded out Christian Horner as a potential replacement. The whispers came after Ferrari's winter misstep, when a suspension redesign left the SF25 generating inconsistent aero load. For a team that ended 2024 as Mercedes' closest challenger, slipping backwards was unacceptable. At the time, critics even suggested that signing Hamilton could be Vasseur's undoing. On paper, it was a coup, bringing in a 7-time world champion to spearhead Ferrari's next title push. But with Hamilton struggling to adapt, it looked like an expensive gamble gone wrong. Vasseur's saving grace came in the form of results elsewhere. Leclerc delivered podiums, stabilising the Constructors' tally at 260 points, while Mercedes lingered just behind on 248. Cooler heads inside Ferrari eventually prevailed. Vasseur earned a contract extension, silencing the speculation, for now. But politics at Ferrari is never dormant. With Vasseur's future secured, the scrutiny has shifted squarely to Hamilton. Each crash, each low finish, doesn't just hurt the Constructors' fight. It reopens the debate. Was Hamilton the right signing? Is the project worth the patience? Ferrari's history shows how quickly support can curdle. In the post-Schumacher years, even short dips in form often triggered wholesale change. Drivers, engineers, strategists, nobody is immune when the red machine feels under siege, and the Italian media feeds that reflex. A single mistake becomes a crisis. For now, Hamilton benefits from Vasseur's backing. The team boss has lived the same pressure and knows the danger of knee-jerk reactions. But patience is a resource Ferrari rarely has in abundance. And if Mercedes leapfrog them in the standings, questions about both Vasseur and Hamilton will return louder than ever. Which raises the next tension point. Is Ferrari's internal culture helping Hamilton adapt, or actively making the transition harder? For all the psychology and politics, the heart of Hamilton's struggle lies in physics. The Ferrari SF25 is a product of the current ground effect era, and that philosophy plays to a completely different set of instincts than the cars Hamilton spent 17 years mastering at Mercedes. Ground effect cars generate most of their downforce through the floor. The moment ride height changes by even a few millimeters, the aero balance shifts dramatically. Ferrari's 2025 suspension redesign aimed to stabilize this, but the trade-off has been a car that punishes aggressive rotation. The rear axle unloads quickly when the driver carries excess speed into a banked or off-camber corner. Exactly the scenario at Zandvoort's Hugenholtz, where Hamilton entered 6 km/h faster than Leclerc. At Mercedes, Hamilton built a style on late braking and rotating the car aggressively on entry, then to trusting rear stability to hold. In the Ferrari, that instinct becomes a liability. Leclerc, raised inside Ferrari's ecosystem, anticipates the car's snap and moderates inputs earlier. Hamilton, by contrast, is still discovering the edges. Telemetry from Friday practice revealed the pattern. Hamilton's minimum corner speeds were consistently 1 to 2 km/h higher than Leclerc's, but his traction phases were longer. Over a full lap, that meant Hamilton's exits cost him nearly 3/10. On race day, the cumulative effect was obvious. This is not about raw pace. Hamilton can still match Leclerc sector by sector. It's about muscle memory. Years of reflexes developed in one aero philosophy must be recoded in another. And doing that while under the microscope of Ferrari politics magnifies every slip. Which leads to the next dilemma. If adaptation is this hard mid-career, how long can Ferrari wait before results justify the investment? And with the 2026 regulations looming, does Hamilton's experience give him an edge, or does it mean he'll always be a step behind Leclerc's generation? Numbers never lie, and the standings tell a brutal truth. McLaren sit on 584 points, more than double Ferrari's total of 260. The title is gone. Ferrari's fight is no longer about chasing glory, but about survival, holding on to second in the Constructors' Championship. And here's where Hamilton's form matters most. Ferrari's cushion over Mercedes is just 12 points. That's a single race swing. One podium for Russell, one off day for Ferrari, and the order flips. Red Bull, meanwhile, trail on 214 points, not out of the fight either. If Ferrari falter, they could tumble to fourth. Leclerc has been the anchor. Roughly 70% of Ferrari's tally has come from him. Hamilton, despite moments of speed, hasn't converted them into results. Zandvoort is the clearest example, running in lockstep with Russell and Leclerc for 22 laps, only to end in the gravel. The 0 points cost Ferrari not only Hamilton's finish, but compromised Leclerc's strategy under the safety car. What should have been a double top six became a missed opportunity. Mercedes smell blood. Russell has been consistent, Antonelli improving, and the car's upgrades are reducing tyre DEG on high downforce tracks. At Zandvoort, Mercedes scored a solid double points finish, narrowing the gap. At circuits like Monza and Singapore, where mechanical grip and straight-line efficiency matter, Ferrari cannot afford Hamilton to misfire again. The mathematics are clear. If Hamilton doesn't begin banking regular top fives, Ferrari will surrender second place. And losing that position isn't just about pride. It affects wind tunnel allocation, sponsor perception, and leverage in contract negotiations. Ferrari's board measures progress not only in trophies, but in beating Mercedes. Slip to third or fourth, and the Hamilton project suddenly looks like an expensive indulgence. So every lap, every strategy call, and every mistake carries a weight larger than Hamilton himself. And in Monza, the Tifosi will judge not only the result, but the trajectory. The next question is simple. Will Hamilton's flashes of brilliance resurface in time to steady Ferrari's season? Or will inconsistency define his first year in red? For all the crashes and subdued finishes, Hamilton's 2025 hasn't been devoid of brilliance. The Chinese sprint was the clearest reminder. On a damp track where grip was fading corner by corner, Hamilton carved through the field with the instinct that made him a 7-time world champion. His racecraft in mixed conditions, honed over nearly 2 decades, remains unmatched. He finished on the podium, less than a second behind Leclerc, and for Ferrari, that was proof the raw speed is still there. Even at Zandvoort, before the crash, Hamilton's pace told a different story. Across the opening 22 laps, his average deficit to Leclerc was just 0.08 seconds per lap. That's not the profile of a driver lost. That's a driver capable of matching Ferrari's established leader when confidence and conditions align. Insiders in the Ferrari garage point to these data points as reason for patience. They argue Hamilton is still learning Ferrari's operational rhythms, the way strategy is built, the way feedback loops flow between driver and engineers. At Mercedes, Hamilton's requests shaped car development. At Ferrari, he is still earning that influence. Once the trust is fully established, they believe his experience will begin paying dividends. And Fred Vasseur knows this storyline well. Just months ago, his own job looked under threat. He survived by proving stability in the face of pressure. Now, he extends that same grace to Hamilton. Ferrari isn't blind to the scoreboard, but they see the flashes that suggest the full picture is still forming. The question is whether these glimpses of vintage Hamilton can be sustained. Because in Formula One, patience is finite. One podium here and there buys time. But Ferrari signed Hamilton to tilt the balance of championships, not just to provide moments. And with Monza next on the calendar, there's no stage bigger for him to prove the tide is turning. The looming test is whether the Tifosi will see another flash of brilliance or another reason to doubt. If Zandvoort was a snapshot of Hamilton's struggles, Monza will be the referendum. For Ferrari, there is no bigger stage. The Tifosi don't simply watch a race at the Temple of Speed, they deliver judgment. Every cheer and every whistle carries the weight of history. Hamilton will arrive knowing exactly what's at stake. Ferrari's 260 points leave them only 12 clear of Mercedes. One slip at Monza, and the Constructors' order could flip. More than that, it's the optics. Ferrari can afford to finish second this year. They cannot afford to lose to Mercedes in front of their own faithful, not after investing tens of millions in Hamilton's signature. The Tifosi are famously unforgiving. Vettel discovered it in 2019, Alonso in 2014. A single mistake can sour an entire season. But they are equally generous with redemption. deliver a podium, fight with courage, and the crowd responds with a roar that can transform a driver's confidence. Even Vasseur admitted last week that Hamilton still carries goodwill. His willingness to shoulder blame, his humility, buys him sympathy. But Monza doesn't reward humility. It rewards results. From a technical standpoint, Ferrari have reasons for optimism. The SF25's straight-line efficiency has improved since the Hungary package. On simulations, Ferrari project a top-speed deficit of only 2.5 kilometers per hour to McLaren, down from nearly 6 earlier in the season. That could bring them into play against Mercedes, whose drag levels remain higher. For Hamilton, that means opportunity. If he can qualify within a tenth of Leclerc and stay in the DRS train, Ferrari could deliver a double top 5. More than points, it would reset the perception that Hamilton is fading. But if Monza ends like Zandvoort, with Leclerc in the points and Hamilton in the gravel, the Tifosi's patience could finally fracture. And in Maranello, once the crowd turns, the political tide often follows. The weekend ahead will not just shape Ferrari's Constructors' fight, it will shape Hamilton's relationship with the Scarlet Red forever. The next question is unavoidable. What happens to Hamilton's Ferrari project if Monza doesn't deliver salvation? Every driver who joins Ferrari knows they're judged on 2 timelines: the immediate season and the long-term project. For Hamilton, the long term is what matters most. The 2026 regulation reset will sweep away much of today's ground effect philosophy, forcing every team to start fresh. That, in theory, is Hamilton's lifeline. By then, he'll have 2 full seasons of Ferrari experience, a deeper relationship with engineers, and the chance to shape the new car's DNA. His technical input, honed during Mercedes' hybrid dominance, could finally pay dividends. Ferrari insiders already whisper that Hamilton's feedback on aero efficiency and brake-by-wire tuning has influenced early 2026 concepts. In that sense, the investment makes sense. But Formula One doesn't wait politely. If Ferrari collapsed to 3rd in the Constructors this year, or worse, 4th behind Red Bull on 214 points, the boardroom patience could evaporate. Sponsors measure value in standings, not promises. And Tifosi don't chant for 2026, they chant for now. The risk is double-edged. If Hamilton can't adapt before the reset, Ferrari may spend 2 years waiting for a version of him that no longer exists. His raw speed is undeniable, but even champions cannot outrun time forever. The very traits that made him untouchable, late braking, car rotation, instinctual aggression, are the ones being punished by Ferrari's current philosophy. Monza, therefore, is not just about points. It is about proving that Hamilton can still bend his instincts to new machinery. If he cannot, the whispers will grow louder, that Ferrari should have built around Leclerc, that Hamilton's signing was a romantic gesture rather than a strategic masterstroke. The 2026 reset could be Hamilton's rebirth, or the moment Ferrari realised they gambled on the wrong champion. And with Mercedes resurgent, McLaren dominant, and Red Bull regrouping, there will be no margin for error when the new era begins. The cliff edge is clear. The only question is whether Hamilton steadies himself in time, or if Ferrari's grand experiment unravels before the reset even arrives. Hamilton's crash at Zandvoort was more than a driver error. It was a snapshot of the intersection where instinct, machinery, and expectation collide. The telemetry tells us he entered Hugenholtz 6 kilometers per hour faster than Leclerc, trusting a rear end that never settled. The Constructors' table tells us Ferrari sit on 260 points, just 12 clear of Mercedes, while McLaren stretch away with 584. And the body language tells us a driver still wrestling with identity inside a team, where patience is measured in podiums, not promises. Yet even within the chaos, there are reasons for Ferrari to wait. The Chinese sprint podium, the narrow qualifying gaps, the flashes of brilliance all suggest Hamilton is not done. The challenge is consistency, translating moments into a season-long rhythm. And with 2026 regulations looming, Ferrari know his experience could become their greatest asset if, and only if, he adapts in time. Ferrari's gamble was never about 2025 trophies. It was about creating a foundation for the next era. Zandvoort showed how fragile that foundation still is. Monza will decide whether it begins to strengthen or whether the cracks widen. So here's the question. Is Hamilton's Ferrari project still the story of a champion learning new tricks? Or are we watching the slow decline of a legend who can no longer bend instinct to machinery? Should Ferrari double down on patience, trusting that 2026 will vindicate them, or cut losses early and build fully around Leclerc? In other words, is Hamilton still the solution to Ferrari's championship puzzle, or the distraction delaying their rise?